She is Ana Paulina Luna, an American of Mexican descent who grew up in Southern California, a recipient of the Air Force Achievement Medal. She was honorably discharged with 5 years of the Air Force active duty and 1 year service in the Air National Guard. She has an undergraduate degree in biology, has served as the Director of Hispanic Engagement for Turning Point, and is the chairwoman of the Hispanic Initiatives at Prager U, and currently the candidate for Florida 13th District. Anna, welcome to the Liberty Hour.
Thank you so much for having me on. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I assume you know Derek. I just had Derek on, and Derek Green. And if the last guest that I was supposed to have didn't switch to dates, I'd have like 3 PragerU presenters here. It would be like a field team or something. But it's good to have you. And I wanted to start there in the sense that a lot of people know you from Turning Point and now PragerU. So you have been getting some press over the last few years and been very effective into explaining the conservative message. So what made you decide to run for office instead?
So really, I mean, what I found is I think like most Americans is I felt very frustrated with the media. And I realized early on in both capacities that, ultimately when you go on television, you have to go through a producer to allow you to really talk on certain segments. And if the producers didn't like my message, didn't like what I was talking about, I wouldn't be booked to really share my perspective. And I think that that's an issue that we're seeing on a lot of mainstream television today, is that amount of control that's really preventing, I think, a message of actual common sense to the American people. And obviously we know that politics is really driven right now with, I think, the Democrat Party on identity politics. So I realized that if I wanted to share that message and change the national discussion, I had to run for Congress, that regardless of, the network, if people didn't agree with, for example, what AOC was doing, they're still covering it. And so I realized at that point that I would be running for office, and it's been incredible, a lot of work, but definitely worth it. And I believe that this is really going to help save the country in one of the most important elections in U.S. history.
Definitely true. And Florida is a very interesting state. So it'd be interesting, to know what the campaign has been like, what your how your message has been received, what you have seen that may surprise people, and what the landscape of Florida like. Because the rest of us who aren't in Florida look at Florida like, man, it's one of those states to go either way. We'll talk about who your opponent is. So, we kind of look at it as, a toss-up state in a sense, and, kind of give us an idea of what's going on there and what it's like.
So Florida as a whole, just for everyone tuning in, there's something called the I-4 corridor, and everything off the I-4 corridor is needed for any president to secure the White House because of how, our electoral college is engineered. So we basically, and especially in my district, which is Florida's 13th congressional district, I'm in a very strategic location in the sense that the president needs this area in order to secure the White House. So there's actually about four to five targeted areas around the state that are one of the most important, I'd say, races and keys in this whole election. And my district happens to be one of them. So it's not just, my district as a whole is historically Republican, but it's currently being held by a Democrat. And it's definitely something that can be flipped. And so I tell people as a whole, with the messaging that we saw with Bernie Sanders early on, where he was very, very, very pro-communist, basically pro-socialist, that didn't sit well with a lot of Hispanic Americans in Miami. And Florida as a whole, along with Texas and California, has a very high demographic of Hispanic Americans. And so, you have to understand that when you are talking on policy and talking on politics, that's a demographic that, politicos can't forget about. And when you see now that Biden is polling so low with the Hispanic American demographic, I mean, that's a direct result why he's aligning himself with AOC, he's aligning himself with Bernie Sanders' policies, and there's a lot of people, especially in Florida, that fled communism, fled socialism from Venezuela, from Cuba. They know what happens with these policies, and they're not going to vote for someone that's going to enforce those like Joe Biden.
Right. And you say that your opponent is a Democrat, but he is not your typical Democrat, right?
Correct.
Both from prominence and where he came from. So those of you who don't know, she is running against Charlie Crist. So That, I mean, I'm sure my listeners would be excited about that. But, that kind of changes. Former Republican, he held statewide office before. So how is that changing either your approach to the race, but what is his camp doing to you? Because you are also not a traditional candidate. You are extremely true blue. I mean, a true conservative through and through. I mean, I've seen the issues on the site. So how does he attack you if he does?
I mean, he's going to have a really hard problem because here's the thing. You're absolutely right. I'm not your average candidate. I literally grew up in the welfare system. I am a minority woman. I'm a second-generation American. My family really struggled with drugs. I literally had to claw my way out of poverty. Ended up joining the military so I could put myself through college. I was actually later on accepted into a medical school, and I turned down that seat in medical school so that I could do what I'm doing right now. So I can tell you that, if he wants to play those cards, he can't just sit there and call me racist because I believe in immigration policy. He can't use some of those lame arguments that the Democrat Party tends to use. But here's the thing, too. I mean, Charlie Crist, for those who might not know who he is, he was a former Republican governor of Florida. He was a Republican. Then he changed parties to independent, and then he's now a Democrat. And he's not just any Democrat, though. He's the fundraiser of the DCCC, which is the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee. So he brings in money to every single Democrat in the country to ensure that their seat is solidified. So he's basically the head of the snake. And really what's interesting about him is that we're in one of the strongest veteran-heavy districts in the state of Florida. So I'd say upwards of about 25% of my district is comprised of veterans. And I am a veteran. And, a lot of people, especially politicians, want to say that they care about veterans' issues and that they'll go to fight for them. They like to take pictures with veterans, just like they like to take pictures with minorities because that, it's good for their voting block. It's been poll tested. Well, I'm not that person, and I'm a very real person at that. So, I mean, they might hit me, but I am who I am, and I'm a street fighter, and that's what's really needed right now in Congress, and that's how I won my primary. I wasn't exactly, I'd say, the establishment pick, and yet nonetheless, I was able to raise over $1.2 million on small dollar donations. That's unheard of. I raised money from all 50 states, U.S. territories, and Washington, D.C. So it very, very quickly became a national race, and my average donation was $20.
That is amazing. Here we are coming up to the break. So tell the people where they can, because the way they do elections now, money comes from all over the country. So tell people where they can find you so they can support you.
Yeah, so all of you can donate to me, and I hope that you do. Go over to voteannapaulina.com. It's ANNA Paulina, PAULINA.com. Or you could head over to any of my social media accounts, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Real Anna Paulina, and you'll find my donation link on there. And I am pro-life, pro-God, pro-Constitution, and anti-socialist.
That sums it up. Anna, thank you for joining me on the Liberty Hour. Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.